You haven't told anyone, but something has been off. It's like you're here, but not really. You smile when people talk to you. You answer texts. You go to work. You do what's expected. But deep down, something in you has unplugged. It's not depression. It's not anxiety. It's not even loneliness. It's something far quieter, far deeper. It's like a gentle echo from inside, whispering that you're no longer where your soul belongs. You scroll through your day like a ghost. The same routine, the same conversations, but you feel like an outsider in your own life. Not because anyone pushed you away, but because something inside you pulled you back. You start avoiding noise. You no longer crave the attention, the constant validation. You don't even have the energy to pretend anymore. And as the world keeps spinning fast around you, you find yourself slowing down, pulling away, going silent, and you wonder why. At first, it scares you. You think you're becoming invisible, that maybe you're losing yourself. But what if you're not disappearing? What if you're being withdrawn for a reason? What if the very distance you feel from the world is the exact space God is creating so you can finally hear yourself? See, no one tells you that spiritual awakenings often begin with a quiet exit. You don't leave the world leaves you. Not in the physical sense, but spiritual, emotional. The people that used to feel like home now feel foreign. The places you used to run to now feel hollow. The noise you used to drown in now irritates your soul, and you don't know how to explain it because nothing bad happened. You just detached. That detachment isn't weakness. It's a rescue mission, a sacred interruption. It's your soul gently pulling you away from everything that was keeping you from hearing your own voice. You weren't made to live in permanent distraction. You weren't born to perform your life for everyone else while your own truth goes unheard. That emptiness you're feeling? It's the space where your real voice is supposed to return. And in that silence, where it feels like nothing is happening, everything is. You're not losing connection. You're being tuned back into your own frequency, back into the core of who you really are when no one's watching. This isn't a breakdown. This is sacred reconstruction. It doesn't come with noise. It comes with stillness. Because sometimes, to reset the soul, God first has to mute the world. You may not realize it yet, but you're in a sacred corridor, a divine hallway between who you were and who you're becoming. And in that hallway, there are no crowds, no background music, no stage lights. There's just you, and that gentle sound of something real waking up inside. That's why everything feels disconnected right now. That's why you've been craving solitude without knowing why. You're not isolating yourself because you're broken. You're isolating because something inside you finally got tired of living a lie. It got tired of being too loud for others and too quiet for yourself. It got tired of making everyone else comfortable while your spirit screamed in silence. And now, that silence is no longer a void. It's a sanctuary. Because in the noise, we survive, but in the silence, we remember. We remember the parts of ourselves that weren't shaped by opinion, applause, or expectations. We remember the version of us that existed before we started bending, shrinking, and overcompensating to be loved. We remember who we were before we got so lost in being useful to others that we became strangers to ourselves. This isn't distance, it's realignment. This isn't rejection, it's protection. You've been pulled out of the noise because there's something sacred that can only be heard in stillness. The world calls it isolation. Heaven calls it preparation. And if you listen closely, if you truly let yourself sink into the discomfort of this silence, you'll begin to hear it. The real you. The you that doesn't need filters, approval, or applause. The you that knows what peace feels like when nothing outside is feeding it. The you that has waited quietly beneath the performance, hoping you'd finally turn inward and remember her. And now, you have. It's strange how the world teaches us that silence is something to be feared, that when things go quiet, it means something's wrong. We panic in the absence of sound, in the absence of feedback, in the absence of others telling us who we are. But what if silence isn't punishment? What if it's precision? What if the silence you're in right now is not abandonment, but alignment? There comes a moment when the soul becomes allergic to noise, Not just the external chaos, but the inner noise too. The overthinking, the replaying of conversation, the endless pretending. It's like your spirit reaches a limit. And when that limit is hit, something ancient inside you awakens, begins to clean house. You start shedding identities you wore for years, personas that helped you survive but never helped you thrive, the role you played for others, the smile you wore in rooms that suffocated you, the performance you gave just to avoid disappointing people who never truly saw you. All of it starts falling apart. And in that collapse, you feel like you're falling apart too. But you're not. You're falling into yourself, into the truth you were too distracted to feel before, into the parts of you that were buried beneath the noise of being enough for everyone but yourself. This is where most people turn back. They mistake this sacred unraveling for failure. They run to fill the silence with more noise, more activity, more distraction, anything to avoid facing themselves. But you didn't do that. You stayed. You sat in the silence. You listened, even when it hurt. And that's why something is beginning to stir in you now. Because once the noise is gone, the voice underneath can finally speak. And it doesn't speak in volume. It speaks in vibration. You don't hear it with your ears. You feel it in your chest, in your gut, in the way your body exhales around certain people and contracts around others, in the way your intuition starts getting louder than your doubt, in the way you start remembering things you didn't even know you forgot. This is what the silence was hiding. Not your destruction, but your return. The return of discernment, of spiritual clarity, of energy that's no longer leaking into people who only wanted your light, but never gave you warmth in return. Think about it. How many of your connections were built on your ability to be useful? How often were you tolerated only when you were performing, entertaining, giving, rescuing? The moment you stopped feeding others, some disappeared. The moment you stopped sacrificing yourself to be accepted, the room got quieter, and that silence hurt. It felt like rejection, but it was revelation. You weren't losing people, you were losing illusion. And in that shedding, a new space opened, a space for truth, a space for healing, a space for the voice you silenced just to fit into lives that were never built to hold your fullness. You started seeing people for who they are, not who you hoped they'd be. You began noticing where your energy flowed easily and where it was always being stolen. You began to understand that peace isn't a destination. It's a decision, one that often requires walking away from everything that taught you to betray yourself in order to be loved. You've been misdiagnosed by a world addicted to noise. They call it isolation. They say you're pulling away, that you're becoming too distant, too quiet, too detached. But what if you're not becoming less? What if you're becoming whole? What if silence is just the cocoon stage of your becoming? Not empty, but sacredly full of what's being rewritten inside you. There's a reason sacred texts and ancient mystics all withdrew into the wilderness, into caves, into deserts, into quiet. Not because they were broken, but because transformation is loud to the soul and quiet to the world. They weren't hiding. They were hearing. They were shedding what no longer served. They were being refined by fire so they could come back speaking truth that the world forgot how to hear. You are not broken for needing space. You are not weak for outgrowing what once felt like home. You are not lost because you no longer relate to what once gave you meaning. This isn't confusion. It's elevation. It's what happens when your spirit stops tolerating counterfeit connections and shallow living. It's what happens when God pulls you back, not to punish you, but to prepare you. And so here you are, in the quiet, in the slow, in the strange in-between. It's uncomfortable, it's disorienting, but it's not empty. This is the womb of your next becoming. Something is being grown here. Strength, vision, authenticity, conviction. Something that can't be built in the crowd. Something that needs solitude to survive. Because when you're alone, you learn something vital, that your worth was never in how many people needed you. Your power was never in how loud your life looked. Your truth doesn't require an audience. It only requires your permission. And now, you're starting to give it. There's a strange kind of fear that sets in when you begin to hear yourself clearly for the first time. It's not the kind of fear that screams. It's the one that whispers and makes you question everything you thought was true. It asks uncomfortable questions in the quiet moments. What if I've been living someone else's life? What if the things I called goals were just inherited survival scripts? What if the people I've been trying to impress were never truly watching me to begin with? This is the haunting beauty of silence. It strips away all the noise we use to define ourselves, the applause, the titles, the roles, and what's left is raw, naked honesty. It's you, looking at yourself, not through the filters of others' opinions, but through the eyes of your own soul. For the first time, you're not asking, "What do they think of me?" You're asking, "What do I think of myself?" When no one else is around to perform for? That shift is terrifying and liberating, because the further you move into your own silence, the more you begin to see where you've been compromising. Not just in the obvious way, like saying yes when you meant no, but in subtle ways. The way you dimmed your excitement so others wouldn't feel insecure. The way you downplayed your insight so you wouldn't outshine someone who never saw your brilliance as a gift. The way you pretended to be smaller, soft, quieter, just so you wouldn't be alone. You start to realize that the isolation you feel now isn't punishment. It's detox, a spiritual deprogramming. Because the life you had before wasn't built by you. It was built on you. Layer by layer, you were shaped to be likable, pleasing, agreeable, and slowly, your edges were sanded down. Your fire was contained. Your voice was trained to say what others needed to hear. But that version of you is crumbling now. You feel it. The pressure in your chest, the tiredness in your bones, the frustration that has no words. It's not depression, it's disconnection from your false self. It's your spirit revolting against the mask. And it's sacred, because the only way to reclaim your truth is to first become disgusted with the lie. That's why you've been withdrawn. That's why the phone stopped ringing, why the invitations stopped coming, why you walk into rooms and feel like a stranger in your own life. It's not that you've become less. It's that your energy no longer feeds the illusions you once served. The performance has ended. And with that ending, you're being invited into something deeper than you've ever known. Have you noticed how much more sensitive you've become lately? Not weak, sensitive. There's a difference. The old you would have called it fragility, but the you that's emerging now recognizes it as discernment. You're no longer desensitized to energy that doesn't match your frequency. Conversations feel different. Environments feel heavier or lighter without explanation. People's true intentions are no longer hidden. You don't even need evidence. You just feel it. That's not paranoia. That's awakening. This is why the silence had to come. Not to isolate you, but to refine your perception. To remind you that you were never meant to fit into a world that profits from your numbness. You were born to feel deeply, to sense things others ignore, to remember what they forgot. And that remembering starts with solitude. There's a story you've likely never heard about ancient initiates. Before being accepted into spiritual mystery schools, they were sent to caves, deserts, or mountaintops, not to study, but to unlearn. They weren't given books, they were given silence. They weren't fed teachings, they were starved of distractions. And it was in that emptiness that the real knowledge appeared, not from outside, but from within. Because the greatest truth is not taught, it's remembered. And maybe that's what this season is for you, a sacred remembering, a divine interruption to everything that was on autopilot, every plan that was leading you further from your own center, every relationship that was a mirror of your own self-abandonment, every commitment that kept you busy but never made you whole. It takes courage to sit in this, to not fill the void with noise, to not panic when the old comforts vanish, to stay present with yourself when there's no validation coming from outside. But that's where power begins, not in performance, but in presence, not in noise, but in knowing, not in doing more, but in daring to do less, until what remains is what's real. And here's the thing nobody tells you. You don't need to find your truth. You need to stop running from it. It's been calling you in 1,000 ways, through frustration, through burnout, through quiet sadness in rooms filled with people. Every discomfort you've tried to numb has been a signal, not a problem to fix, but a portal to enter. This season of withdrawal isn't a pause in your story. It is the story, It's the part they never show in highlight reels, the part where the hero disappears before the transformation, the dark night, the unseen chapter, the hidden process. But it's also the place where everything changes, not externally, but internally. It's where your real self begins to take root. And if you can trust that, if you can trust this moment, not fight it, not shame it, not rush through it, but be in it, you'll discover that the silence you feared most is actually the doorway you've been waiting for all along. There's a sacred rhythm to transformation that almost no one talks about. Because it doesn't look like firework, it doesn't sound like applause. In fact, it looks a lot like nothing is happening. It feels like emptiness, stillness, a long, unanswered prayer. You wake up, and the sky looks the same, your surroundings unchanged, but inside, everything is rearranged. You feel it before you can name it. Something is unraveling. Something is being rebuilt, but it all happens in the dark. And that darkness isn't a punishment, it's preparation. Think of the seed, buried in silence. No sunlight, no recognition. It doesn't look like life is growing. It looks like it's been forgotten. But underground, out of sight, the seed is cracking open, breaking, dying even. And yet, it is this breaking that is necessary for new roots to form. Without the silence, without the pressure, without the death of what it once was, there can be no growth. This is what the silence is doing to you. You've been pulled away from the noise, not because you failed, because the version of you that once performed in that noise cannot survive the next season. The stage has changed. The script is being rewritten, and you've been invited to sit in the audience of your own soul, to watch the illusion of who you thought you had to be fall apart. That collapse feels like loss, but it's actually sacred clarity. The friendship that faded, the career paths that dried up, the invitations that stopped, they weren't random, they were reroute. Life didn't reject you, it redirected you. Because you were trying to build a future with people who only knew the old you. You were trying to grow roots in soil that couldn't sustain the truth of your calling. So silence came, disconnection came, and with them, the space to finally hear the voice that had been drowned out for years, your own. But here's the irony most people miss, especially when they start hearing that voice. It's not always gentle. It doesn't always whisper love and light. Sometimes your own voice starts asking questions that shake the ground beneath you. Why did you stay in that relationship so long? Why have you been living for approval you don't even respect? Why have you been tolerating what drains you? Those questions don't come to shame you. They come to free you. They are not judgment, they're awakening. But they only arrive when the noise is gone. And that's why the silence is not absent. It's sacred confrontation. You begin to see the way you traded your truth for comfort, the way you allowed others' expectations to sculpt your identity, the way you confused busyness with meaning, attention with love, comfort with peace. These realizations are painful, but they are also gifts, because what is brought into the light can finally be healed. And this is the turning point, when you realize that the silence was never empty. It was full of you, not the version of you the world demanded, but the one you lost in the chase, the one that laughed without self-monitoring, the one that felt things deeply without apologizing, the one that knew how to sit still and feel joy without earning it. That version of you was never gone, just buried. And now, in the silence, she's returning. You'll start to notice it in strange ways. The sudden peace you feel while doing nothing. The small but powerful moments where you say no without guilt. The days you no longer crave validation. The mornings you wake up and no longer feel the need to prove anything. That's not laziness. That's alignment. That's your soul coming back online. But don't be surprised if, during this return, everything familiar begins to feel foreign. People you once connected with might now seem distant. Old passions may no longer excite you. Even your own voice may sound unfamiliar as it shifts into authenticity. This disorientation is normal. It's a sign that you're not just evolving, you're shedding. Think of a snake in mid-shed, vulnerable, sensitive, half inside the old skin, half breaking free. That's where you are, not broken, not lost, just in between. And in this in-between, your greatest temptation will be to rush back into the noise, to fill the silence, to prove that you're still doing something. But don't. Stay here a little longer. The stillness is where your next self is being formed, and this is where things begin to stir beneath the surface. After all the unraveling, all the weeping, all the wondering if any of this is leading somewhere, a quiet strength begins to emerge, a deeper knowing, a spiritual clarity that doesn't need to shout. It simply stands, firm, quiet, unshakable. You start to carry yourself differently, not with arrogance, but with authority, not to impress, but to express. You don't need to convince anymore, because you are the proof. The people around you might not understand it. Some might even resist it. They'll say you've changed, and they're right. But it's not a change they can define, because you didn't become someone new. You returned to someone ancient, the real you, the original blueprint, and that version cannot be manipulated, measured, or marketed. It can only be felt, and it will be, in the way you speak, in the way you move, in the energy you bring into a room. Not loud, not desperate, just clear. And that clarity will repel some, but it will awaken others. Because when one person returns to their essence, they unconsciously give others permission to do the same. So if you've been feeling like your life is quieter than it should be, if you've been wondering why everything that once made sense no longer fits, if you've been scared by how much you've lost in order to find yourself, know this: nothing real is ever taken. Only illusions are burned, and in their place, something truer is being born. And it all begins with silence. At some point, without warning, the silence begins to feel less like exile and more like home. You stop counting the days you've been hidden. You no longer measure your worth by how visible you are. Instead, you begin to recognize a new kind of intimacy, the one that happens between you and the divine, away from the noise. You realize that you weren't being ignored. You were being protected from the versions of success that would have destroyed you, protected from the voices that would have kept you small, protected from the roles that required you to betray yourself to be accepted. It's here, in this divine hush, that you discover something profound. You were never meant to be like everyone else. You weren't designed to run with the crowd. Your sensitivity, your depth, your need to pause and reflect, it's not a flaw. It's your guidance system. And for so long, you ignored it, trying to be normal. But normal almost killed your spirit. Normal left you anxious, disconnected, and starving for something real. This is why the silence had to come. It interrupted the program. It shattered the rhythm of survival so your soul could finally speak. And when it did, it didn't ask for more hustle. It didn't ask for validation. It didn't ask for applause. It asked for truth. Truth that doesn't fit into headlines. Truth that doesn't make you more liked, but makes you more whole. Truth that sometimes makes you cry in the shower or sit in your car longer than you need to, just to breathe. Truth that doesn't always sound poetic. It feels like freedom. And once you've tasted that, going back becomes impossible. But there's a paradox here. As you become more aligned with your essence, you may find yourself more misunderstood by the world around you. People who once felt close might begin to feel foreign, not because you hate them, not because they failed you, but because you no longer recognize yourself in the places you used to fit. That is the cost of awakening, outgrowing the containers that once defined you, and it's painful. There's grief in it, grief for the life you planned before you knew who you really were, grief for the dreams you chased because someone else told you they mattered. Grief for the years you played small to stay loved. And yet, beneath that grief is something holy: release. You start letting go of what you never truly wanted, the job title that made you feel important but drained your soul, the friendships that revolved around performance, the spiritual beliefs that shamed your doubt instead of embracing your depth. You stop pretending to be at peace with things that quietly suffocate you, because now, you know, your peace is non-negotiable. And with that clarity comes a new kind of courage. Not the kind that climbs mountains or breaks records, but the kind that says, I will no longer abandon myself to belong. The kind that allows you to be alone without being lonely. The kind that chooses integrity over popularity. The kind that walks away not out of anger, but out of reverence for your own spirit. It's this quiet, consistent integrity that starts creating miracles in your life. Not flashy, not overnight, but deep and lasting. You begin to attract people who see the real you. You find paths that align with your gifts instead of your wound. You wake up and realize you are no longer surviving, you are living. And this is the final truth the silence wants you to understand. You were never meant to be hidden forever. You were only hidden to be made whole. God doesn't hide things He wants to forget. He hides things He wants to protect, to shape, to anoint. Just like precious metals are formed in fire and diamonds are formed in pressure, your season of silence was the process of refinement, not punishment, but preparation. Because something sacred cannot be revealed until it is strong enough to stand in the light without collapsing under the weight of expectation. And now, you're ready. You've been through the empty nights. You've wrestled with your own reflection. You've stood in the stillness and felt everything you once avoided. You've cried prayers that no one will ever hear. And now, something new is emerging. It's not loud, it's not frantic, but it's steady, pure, true. It's you. And the world won't know how to label it, because it won't come with a spotlight or a title. It will come through presence, through the way you walk into a room and bring peace, through the way you speak and hearts soften, through the way you live, free from the need to explain yourself. That kind of power cannot be taught. It can only be remembered. So if you've been waiting for a sign that the silence is over, here it is. The silence did its work. The isolation was not your ending. It was your becoming. And now, what was once hidden is ready to be revealed. Not for performance, but for purpose. You don't need to fight to be seen anymore. You are the revelation. The healed, aligned, radiant version of you. Not perfect, not finished, but no longer lost in the noise. Because now you know, the silence wasn't the absence of something. It was the presence of everything your soul needed to return. And you've returned.